Last week we started talking about the whole idea of does God really exist? And I talked to you about this metaphor of putting God on trial, that we're a jury and we're looking at evidence on what does the evidence say about the existence of God. And I talked to you a little bit about evolution and the core beliefs you have to believe if you're going to be an evolutionist. And they are this: that nothing produces everything, that non-life produces life, that randomness produces fine-tuning, that chaos produces order, that unconsciousness produces consciousness, and that non-reason produces reason. And I talked about how hard it is with evidence to prove that any of that is true. And yet, when it comes to the evidences on the side of creation, the evidence is overwhelming that there is a God who created the heavens and the earth. And the primary evidence is wrapped around what's called the anthropic principle. And I'm going to read to you kind of a working definition of the anthropic principle. The anthropic principle states that all science and math formulas come together perfectly to create and sustain life. One minor change and life disappears. In other words, anthropic, man, human beings, that everything in this universe is so fine-tuned and so intricate and so complicated, and it's all put in place specifically designed for human beings to live on the planet Earth. And it's so fine-tuned and it's so complicated that it is not reasonable nor possible for all of this to have happened by accident. And that is the fine-tuning argument, is what they call it in the scientific world. It's the anthropic principle. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about physics, astronomy, microbiology, DNA evidence that would back up. Does it back up evolution, or does it back up a creator? And I'm just going to look at the evidence. And remember, we're the jury and God's on trial, and we're looking for the reasonable explanation for why we are here and why the universe is the way the universe is. Okay, so first thing we have to understand is how complicated the universe is. Okay, so I want to go to physics first. And of course, when quantum physics came into being through Einstein, it really did. The beginning of quantum physics was the end of Darwinism and evolution. Quantum physics changed the way we view the universe, changed the way we view ourselves, the world, helps us understand that there really was a divine being behind everything that has been created. And I'll show you that today. So I want to begin by talking again about what the atheists believe. Okay, atheists believe, evolutionists believe, that the design of our world is a chance collision of floating gases which set in motion a random series of events that over billions of years has resulted in the intricacy and complicated us that we are today. Everything that you see today happened through this chance collision of these gases billions of years ago. And that out of that randomness came the intricacy of everything we have today. Out of that non-life came life. Out of the chaos came all of that order. And it just happened accidentally. It just happened accidentally. Now, what's interesting is they still can't explain what the origin of those floating gases. Now, remember, I told you last time that Darwin said God originally created the floating gases, the chemicals that started the whole process. Okay? Well, then we went through a period of time where the scientists said, no, there's not a God, so that can't be it. But they have no explanation. Their explanation is, we don't know yet. That's their explanation. Okay? But I want you to think about this. I want you to think about the probability, that non-living chemicals could self-assemble into a living cell. And there's actually a mathematical probability for how that could happen. And it's happened since the birth of supercomputers. We now have supercomputers that can compute things mathematically that we used to not be able to compute. Okay? And so with these supercomputers, mathematicians and physicists and biochemists and astronomers are all working together now, asking the question, not only did it happen by accident, but what's the probability that it happened by accident. So I'm not asking the question today, what's the probability that non-living chemicals could produce human beings and everything we see today? I'm only asking the question, what's the probability that non-living chemicals could self-assemble by accident into a living cell, that it could go from non-life to life? What's the probability? Well, interestingly enough, Sir Fred Hoyle, who is an astronomer and atheist from Cambridge University, did the math. And here's what he came up with. He says mathematically, it is 1 times 10 to the 243rd power chance for one single structured molecule to be created. So if you want to wrap your mind around that, get out a piece of paper, write 1 times 10, and then put 243 zeros at the end. That's the mathematical probability. Not that we would be created, but that one living molecule could be created from non-life. And this is his illustration. He says it is more likely for a tornado in a junkyard to randomly create a 747 jet than for random gases to produce life. I want you to think about that. It's mathematically more possible. I was raised in Texas. I know about tornadoes. We used to have tornado season, and I've seen a few in my life. It's more likely for a tornado to come through and hit a junkyard, and when the tornado leaves, there's this fully functional 747 jet sitting in front of me. Mathematically, it's more possible to do that than for non-living chemicals to produce one living cell. So let me ask you a question. Is it reasonable to believe that this all happened by accident? And that's the argument of the fine-tuning or the anthropic principle. Things are so complicated in our universe, and they are so intricate in the way that they're put together, that it is absolutely impossible for it to have happened by accident. Let me give you some examples. 1966. Carl Sagan came out and he announced that there were 2 criteria for life on a planet. Criteria number 1 is the right star with the right planet. And criteria number 2, a planet the correct distance from that star. So he comes out and announces, look, there's probably life on planets all over this universe. And the reason is there's only 2 criteria you have to create and sustain life. And it's this: you need to have the right star, and you need to have the right planet, the right distance from the right star. And those 2 criteria are all you need. So therefore, there's probably life on planets all over this universe. And so NASA actually worked with the federal government, and we put together all of this highly sophisticated equipment to send out radio waves and microwaves out into the universe so we can communicate with all of the extraterrestrials out there. Well, guess what? 55 years later, we haven't heard back. Our texts have not been answered. And now scientists are saying the chances of there being life on any other planets are almost impossible. And here's the reason. So far, scientists have not discovered that there's 2 criteria that you need to sustain life on a planet. 15 years ago, they thought there were 30. Today, they know there are over 200 criteria, mathematical formulas, things that have to come together absolutely perfectly to sustain life in our universe. Over 200. And they have to stack up perfectly for life to be sustained on planet Earth. And it seems like that everything in the whole universe is set up just to sustain life on this earth. So let me give you some examples. Physicist, philosopher Robin Collins states this: gravity is fine-tuned to 1 part in 100 million billion 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 billion. Think about how fine-tuned gravity has to be to, 1, not crush us, or 2, on the other hand, that we don't float away. He said it's fine-tuned that well. 1 in 100 million billion 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 billion. Is that by accident? Second, the cosmological constant, which represents the energy density of space is as precise. Now I want you to think about this. This is how precise it is to create and sustain life on this planet, as throwing a dart from space. So think about sitting on the space station with a gun and shooting back to Earth and hitting a bullseye just a trillionth of an inch in diameter. That's how precise the cosmological constant must be. And if it changes at all, life ceases to exist. There are 4 fundamental forces that must be in perfect harmony for the universe to exist. They are this: gravity, electromagnetism, strong nuclear force, and weak nuclear force. Alter any of the 4 just slightly, and the universe does not exist. And there's all sorts of different applications to that, and everything has to fit together perfectly. So let me just give you one example. If the ratio between the strong nuclear force and electromagnetism were any different, no stars would ever have been formed. So all of these things I'm talking about, I want you to think about that. I'm talking about 2 or 3 or 4. There's over 200 of them that layer on top of one another that all have to fit perfectly together for the universe to exist, for the earth to exist, and for life to exist. Patrick Glenn wrote a book several years ago called God the Evidence. And he was an atheist that once he went through all of this, he changed to become a believer. He believed now that God exists. And he states this: today, the concrete data point strongly in the direction of the God hypothesis. It is the simplest and most obvious solution to the anthropic puzzle. So I want you to think about what that means. All of these physics and principles have to come together, and they have to come together perfectly. So Collins affirms that chance cannot reasonably account for the anthropic principle, and that the most discussed alternative, that there are multiple universes, lacks any evidential support and ultimately collapses upon the realization that those worlds would owe their existence to a highly designed process as well. So they're trying to go into multiple universes. They're trying to go into all sorts of things to try to explain the fine-tuning principle. Reality is they've lost the battle. The only answer is there's a creator. There's 2 illustrations I want to give you for us common minds when it comes to the mathematical probability for life existing on this planet. Okay? So think about 200 different physics properties. They all have to fit together perfectly in order to sustain life. They're so exacting that here are the illustrations for you. Number 1, the number of probabilities that must remain in perfect harmony to sustain life. It would be the same as if you took dimes and placed them all over the surface of the United States. You stacked the dimes all the way to the moon, and if you pull out one dime, the universe ceases to exist. Just wrap your mind around that. That is what scientists say are the number of probabilities that have to fit together perfectly for life to exist. And I want you to know that the astrophysicists, most of the higher level scientists today are saying there's no way it's evolution. There's no way it's by accident. This is the result of a creator. Let me give you another example. You take a coin and you flip it 10 quintillion times in a row, it lands on heads. 10 quintillion times in a row, it lands on head. That's the probability that life in this universe happened randomly. It just is simply impossible. That's why there are currently very few atheists in physics. And in fact, Fred Hoyle, who is the developer of the Big Bang Theory, says this: my atheism is greatly shaken by this development. Isn't that interesting? The guy who started the Big Bang Theory says, oh boy, I'm not sure I'm buying my own line anymore. This is too overwhelming to think about it. My faith is greatly shaken. My atheism is. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? The evidence, God's on trial here, the evidence points to a God. So let's look at astronomy for a moment. Similar to the fine-tuning of physics, Earth's position in the universe is intricately choreographed. Geologically and chemical processes work together with incredible efficiency to create a safe place for humans to exist. So, for example, astronomer Gonzalez and science philosopher Richards said that it would take a star with the highly unusual properties of our sun, the right mass, the right light, the right age, the right distance, the right orbit, the right galaxy, the right location, to nurture living organisms on a circling planet. Remember what I told you back in 1966 when Carl Sagan says, all it takes is a star and a planet about the same distance from the star as ours, and you probably have life. They're saying, no. Our sun is completely unique from all the other stars in the universe. It has to be the right mass, the right light, the right age, the right distance, the right orbit. It has to be perfect in order to sustain life. Jupiter has a strong gravity-rich environment which protects Earth from being destroyed by asteroids. Think about how many movies we have about the end of the world coming because of a huge asteroid, and you hear about asteroids coming into our space on occasion. But did you know that God created the universe in such a way that the gravity pull in Jupiter serves as a shield for Earth, so that every asteroid that comes into our solar system is sucked into Jupiter's gravity shield, and it protects the Earth. God protects the Earth from asteroids through Jupiter. Now, does one get through every once in a while? Yes, but it burns up before it ever hits Earth. God protected the Earth through the way He created that. Did that just happen by accident? Well, here's what the astronomists are now saying. Harvard-educated astrophysicist John O'Keefe from NASA says, if the universe had not been made with the most exacting precision, we could never have come into existence. It is my view that these circumstances indicate the universe was created for man to live in. The well-known atheist Christopher Hitchens says, without question, the fine-tuning argument is the most powerful argument of the other side. And Oxford University professor Dr. John Lennox concludes, the more we get to know about our universe, the more the hypothesis that there is a creator gains credibility as the best explanation for why we are here. Once again, you look at astronomy, you look at the way the Earth is designed, the solar system, the other planets, the sun, and the astronomers are going, this is just too highly unlikely to have happened by accident. There had to be a creator. The evidence is overwhelming. So I'm going to stop here today. That's kind of what science says. When you look at what's going on out in the world, out in the universe, when you look at the stars, when you look at physics and all the properties that have to come together, when you look at the anthropic principle and the fine-tuning argument, in science and in physics and in astronomy, the evidence is overwhelming for a creator and against evolution. But we still have to look at some other things like the human body, DNA, our moral consciousness issue. And so we'll take those up in our next video and we'll look at all of those issues. But for today, I just want you to think about the science of this. Now, here's what I would love for you to do. I would love for you to go do your own research. I'm an editor here. There's thousands of pages of books. There's tons of podcasts and videos that you can watch on this. So what I would encourage you to do is I would encourage you to go in and type in the anthropic principle. Listen to some things. Talk to people about things. Go and listen to Lee Strobel talk about it. Lee Strobel's done so much evidential work in this and can talk to you about these things. There are so many scientists that are creationists now that will help you understand the science. So don't believe me, go do the research for yourself. But I think you're going to find the evidence is overwhelming for God as the creator. Let's pray. Father, thank you for showing off. Thank you for revealing yourself to us through science. Lord, science has never been the enemy of you. It's always been your friend. And as long as we do real science and not pop psychology science, as long as we're looking at facts and not theories, Lord, it always points to you. And Lord, the evidence is overwhelming that you are real and you exist and you created this intricate universe, and we thank you for that, God. Lord, I pray that you will take these truths and bind them in our hearts and ready us to be able to have intellectual conversations with people about how we know that you're the creator of the universe. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. Have a great day.